February 1933. New York was under pressure. Prohibition was ending. Old revenue systems were weakening. Men who had built power through alcohol were searching for replacement income. One of those men was Dutch Schultz. He did not think in neighborhoods. He thought in systems. Harlem was a system that worked. Every day, thousands of small bets moved through the numbers racket. 5 cents at a time. Sometimes less. Sometimes more. Individually, the bets were meaningless. Together they created steady flow. That flow paid runners. It paid protection. It paid silence. In 1933, silence was valuable. Most people in Harlem earned less than $10 a week. A small win could change a household for days. That made participation constant. Where participation is constant, control matters. By the early 1930s, that control already existed. Madame St. Clair managed the structure. She handled accounting, distribution, and relationships. Nearby was Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy was not a public figure. He did not make speeches. He did not advertise strength. His role was maintenance. When money disappeared, it returned. When runners were pressured, the pressure stopped. When police interfered too often, consequences followed. Sometimes those consequences were legal. Sometimes they were professional. Violence was not the first tool. This system worked because it was predictable. Dutch Schultz observed Harlem from a distance. From his position in the Bronx, the numbers racket looked exposed. No Italian family name. No formal commission protection. No obvious outside alliances. To Dutch, that suggested vulnerability. He sent people to measure the operation. They returned with estimates. Daily intake. Weekly totals. Low overhead. High compliance. The incentive was clear. A takeover would not require expansion, only replacement, but replacement carried risk. Harlem was not empty space. It responded to pressure. Dutch chose the lowest cost approach first. January 1933, emissaries were sent. They arrived without weapons. They spoke calmly. They offered cooperation. The proposal was simple. Share revenue. Accept oversight. Avoid conflict. Madame St. Clair refused. No negotiation. No delay. During that meeting, Bumpy Johnson spoke very little. He watched who delivered the message. He watched who avoided eye contact. He memorized tone. Refusal increased cost. Dutch understood that. By February, the option of waiting became expensive. Control required a signal, not loud, not public, targeted. Removing the enforcer would destabilize the system. Destabilization would lower resistance. Lower resistance would open access. The date was selected. February 14, 1933. Pressure was about to be applied. February 14, 1933. Before dawn. Harlem was awake, but quiet. Night workers were returning home. Morning crews had not yet started. This was a low visibility window. That mattered. Bumpy Johnson moved alone. No driver waited outside. No men followed behind him. No visible protection. In Harlem, that was not accidental. Being alone reduced attention. It suggested routine. It lowered expectation. Information had reached him earlier. Not a warning, not a threat. Just changes. Strangers in familiar places. Doors opening at unusual hours. Certain faces appearing more than once. That was enough. Bumpy did not alert others. He did not gather support. He adjusted timing and direction. The Cotton Club basement was not part of the public image. The famous room upstairs catered to white customers. The basement served a different purpose. Storage, after-hours games, private meetings. One staircase. No windows. Limited space. Control favored whoever prepared first. Around 4:30 a.m., Bumpy walked down the stairs. The light was already on. That detail mattered. It meant someone was waiting. 12 men stood in the room. They were positioned, not crowded. Each had clear space. Each had line of sight. This was not local muscle. Local crews talked. They showed emotion. They rushed. These men were quiet. They had been selected for reliability. No witnesses were expected. No delay was planned. From a structural view, the result was already decided. 12 against 1. Close range. One exit. This was not personal. It was procedural. The men expected sequence, recognition, submission, execution. Bumpy did not follow the sequence. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He did not reach for anything. He did not speak immediately. He looked around the room. Slowly. He counted. That pause disrupted timing. Systems depend on rhythm. When rhythm breaks, cost appears. One man spoke. He identified authority. He delivered instruction. This was how hierarchy enforced order. Bumpy listened. Then he asked a short question. Not loud, not defiant. It questioned scale. That question changed the room. Eyes moved. Attention shifted. Someone glanced toward the stairs. No one answered right away. Nothing had gone wrong yet. But something had changed. The plan still existed. The certainty did not. In enclosed spaces, hesitation spreads. Pressure was no longer one-directional. The room was still controlled. But control was no longer complete. Time passed differently in that room. Not minutes. Seconds. Seconds were enough. 12 men held weapons. Weapons create confidence. But confidence depends on order. Order depends on timing. The men expected movement. They expected fear. They expected noise. They did not expect calculation. Bumpy Johnson understood environments. Not emotionally. Structurally. He knew the basement. The ceiling was low. The space was narrow. Sound bounced. Light mattered more than weapons. The hanging bulb was old. One chord. One point of failure. This was not instinct. It was familiarity. The men did not share that familiarity. They were visitors. They relied on numbers and surprise. Both require visibility. Another second passed. No one fired. At that point, the cost of action had changed. If they shot immediately, noise would travel upward. If they waited, uncertainty increased. Either choice now carried risk. That moment mattered. Bumpy moved. Not fast, not wide. Direct. He struck the light. Glass broke. The bulb shattered. The room went dark. Darkness changed the structure. Lines of sight disappeared. Distance became unclear. Coordination collapsed. The first shots came quickly. Not aimed. Not controlled. Weapons fire filled the space. In enclosed rooms, sound confuses direction. Men fired toward noise, toward movement they imagined. Commands were shouted. They were not followed. Fear does not obey hierarchy. Bumpy did not fire. That detail mattered. Gunfire creates targets. Movement without sound creates uncertainty. He used the room. Tables, crates, corners. The men did not know the layout. They bumped into each other. They shouted warnings too late. In that darkness, structure broke down. Not because of strength, because of confusion. Minutes passed. Not many, but long enough. When the firing stopped, the room was quiet again. Not controlled quiet. Exhausted quiet. Bodies were on the floor. Some injured. Some unconscious. Not all were dead. That mattered. When the basement door opened later, light returned. Bumpy Johnson was gone. He did not stay to explain. He did not stay to claim anything. One man remained conscious. He was not chosen by chance. He was left. That decision carried meaning. The system had not ended. It had sent a message. Pressure had shifted. Not loudly, not publicly, but permanently. Morning light reached the street level first. It took longer to reach the basement. When the door finally opened, the scene was already settled. No movement. No noise. 11 men were down. Some were injured by gunfire. Some by falls. Some by each other. This mattered. It meant control had collapsed from inside, not from force alone. One man was still conscious. He was sitting against the wall, breathing fast, weapon still in his hand. He had not been overlooked. He had been spared. That distinction mattered. Bumpy Johnson was no longer there. He did not wait for questions. He did not wait for witnesses. He left the room empty of explanation. The surviving man moved slowly. Broken ribs limited speed. Pain limited balance. It took him time to reach the street. By then, the city was waking up. Delivery trucks. Early commuters. Normal routines. Blood on a man in the early morning did not stop traffic. It blended into the city's noise. He found transportation using cash. No names, no conversation. The destination was clear. The Bronx, Arthur Avenue, Dutch Schultz's social club. By the time he arrived, breakfast was being served. Eggs, toast, coffee, routine. Dutch Schultz was reading the newspaper. This mattered. He was not hiding. He was not expecting trouble. When the man entered, conversation stopped. The condition of the messenger explained enough. Dutch looked up. He asked one question. Where are the others? The answer was delayed, not from drama, from physical effort. The words came quietly. All of them. That changed the room. Dutch stood slowly. Standing is a form of control. It resets hierarchy. He asked again. The man explained why he was still alive. Not mercy. Instruction. He reached into his jacket. This movement caused reaction. Hands went to weapons. Eyes narrowed. But what came out was not a gun. It was a single playing card. An ace. Marked by blood. The man placed it on the table. He delivered the message exactly. No additions. No interpretation. The room stayed quiet. Dutch did not react immediately. That mattered. He examined the card. Not the blood. The symbol. Symbols increase cost without increasing violence. He understood that. Sending 12 men had failed. Sending more would escalate cost. Not just bodies. Police attention. Political pressure. Public exposure. Harlem was not empty territory. It had people. It had loyalty. It had memory. Dutch weighed incentive against risk. The numbers money was real. But it was not unique. There were other markets. Other systems. Lower resistance. He made a decision. Not loudly, not emotionally. He ended the operation. No retaliation. No second attempt. The card was destroyed. The message was accepted. After that morning, no more men were sent north. The structure in Harlem remained intact, not because violence had won, because cost had become too high. This was not a victory. It was an adjustment. Power did not disappear. It moved elsewhere. The change was not announced. There was no meeting, no public agreement, no explanation offered. But behavior shifted. Dutch Schultz redirected attention. Resources moved south and west. Harlem was removed from his calculations. That silence was the result. In Harlem, nothing looked different at first. The numbers runners kept working. Collections continued on schedule. Money moved through the same hands. That mattered. Systems show strength by continuing. Bumpy Johnson did not make statements. He did not increase visibility. He did not claim credit. He returned to routine. Protection. Correction. Maintenance. The message had already done its work. Other groups noticed the adjustment. They did not hear details. They did not need them. They saw what did not happen. No retaliation. No follow-up violence. No expansion north. In organized systems, absence is information. The cost of interference in Harlem had increased. Not because of threat, because of consequence. Police pressure did not change. Political relationships remained cautious. Public life continued under strain. But the internal balance held. Bumpy Johnson's position shifted quietly. Not upward in title, upward in leverage. Access to him became more careful. Language around him became restrained. He spoke little. That did not change. Listening to him became more important. That did change. The event did not end conflict in Harlem. Conflict did not disappear. But the structure adjusted. Incentives changed. Risk was recalculated. Violence did not become policy. It became unnecessary. That was the result. Years later, stories grew larger. Details sharpened. Timelines blurred. But the outcome remained consistent. After February 14, 1933, external pressure on Harlem reduced. Not because Harlem became harmless. Because it became expensive. Power did not announce itself. It demonstrated cost. This was not a legend about strength. It was a lesson in systems. Pressure applied. Costs measured. Decisions adjusted. This is how power worked. The adjustment held. Weeks passed. Then months. No new crews appeared. No new demands arrived. No indirect pressure followed. That absence confirmed the decision. For Dutch Schultz, the calculation had closed. Harlem no longer offered favorable risk. The numbers racket continued without interruption. Money flowed the same way. Runners stayed in place. Collections remained predictable. Predictability was the goal. For Madame St. Clair, the system stabilized. For Bumpy Johnson, the role did not change. Only the margin of error did. Fewer tests came from outside. Fewer probes followed. This did not mean safety. It meant recognition. Other operators adjusted quietly. Some avoided Harlem entirely. Some approached more carefully. Language softened. Timelines slowed. Requests replaced threats. That shift mattered more than reputation. Bumpy did not expand territory. He did not seek headlines. He did not build mythology. He focused on access. Who could speak? Who could operate? Who could move money without disruption? Control of access reduces the need for force. That was understood. Law enforcement continued its patterns. Occasional raids. Occasional arrests. But nothing coordinated. Nothing sustained. Political pressure remained divided. Too many interests overlapped. The system absorbed it. By the late 1930s, Harlem's internal structure had matured. Violence became rarer. Costs became clearer. Incentives aligned. Bumpy Johnson aged into his position, not as a symbol, as a constant. He did not eliminate conflict. He managed exposure. That was his value. Looking back, the basement incident did not create power. It clarified it. It showed where pressure failed. It showed where cost exceeded reward. No speeches followed. No celebrations marked the change. Only behavior shifted. That is how durable systems operate. Quietly. By the early 1940s, the pattern was clear. Harlem was not closed. It was filtered. Money still moved. People still gambled. Police still watched. But access had rules. Outsiders did not enter casually. Demands were weighed. Pressure was returned indirectly. The cost of interference stayed high. That mattered more than fear. Bumpy Johnson did not dominate through presence. He dominated through timing. He answered slowly. He refused often. He cooperated selectively. Those choices shaped outcomes. Violence did not disappear, but it stopped being efficient. When violence becomes inefficient, systems change. Dutch Schultz continued his career elsewhere. He pursued other markets, other conflicts. That was not retreat. It was allocation. Power does not cling to bad investments. In Harlem, the structure endured because it adapted. It did not challenge larger systems openly. It did not invite unnecessary attention. It stayed local. It stayed useful. The events of February 1933 were not repeated. They did not need to be. The message had already circulated. Pressure met resistance. Resistance raised cost. Cost shifted behavior. No one celebrated that outcome. There was nothing to celebrate. It was not victory. It was alignment. Years later, stories would simplify it. They would focus on darkness and bodies and courage. Those details missed the point. What mattered was restraint, calculation, adjustment. Power did not change hands loudly. It moved quietly. This is how power worked. Nothing about the outcome was permanent. That mattered. Power in this period never stayed fixed. It shifted with money. It shifted with politics. It shifted with attention. What happened in 1933 did not freeze Harlem in place. It bought time. Time to stabilize routines. Time to strengthen internal cooperation. Time to avoid unnecessary exposure. Bumpy Johnson understood that time was a resource. He did not spend it on expansion. He did not spend it on reputation. He spent it on maintenance. Keeping violence rare. Keeping money predictable. Keeping outsiders uncertain. That balance reduced pressure. As years passed, the system around Harlem changed again. Federal attention increased. Organized crime became more centralized. Independent operators faced new costs. Adjustments followed. Some alliances formed. Some independence was traded for protection. Some control was shared to reduce risk. This was not surrender. It was adaptation. The lesson from February 1933 remained active. Direct force invites response. Indirect pressure reshapes behavior. Bumpy Johnson did not become powerful because he survived abasement. He remained relevant because he understood incentives. Who pays? Who benefits? Who absorbs risk? Those questions mattered more than fear. When the system no longer rewarded confrontation, confrontation faded. Harlem continued to exist under pressure. So did its operators. So did its contradictions. No one won permanently. No one ruled without limits. But for a time, balance held. That balance was not created by violence. It was created by cost. This is how power worked. Quietly. Indirectly. And only for as long as the system allowed. By the end of the decade, the record was clear. No formal agreement had ever been written. No boundary had been announced. But behavior told the story. Harlem remained active. Outside pressure stayed limited. Major incursions did not return. This was not because fear had spread. It was because incentives had changed. For outside operators, the numbers no longer worked. Too much attention. Too much resistance. Too many indirect costs. For local operators, stability became the priority. Predictable income mattered more than expansion. Quiet cooperation mattered more than display. The system adjusted on its own. Bumpy Johnson remained part of that system. Not as a symbol, as a function. He enforced limits. He absorbed pressure. He reduced noise. That role did not make him untouchable. It made him useful. Usefulness creates tolerance. Tolerance creates space. Over time, larger forces moved in. Federal law, national syndicates, new rules. Each wave reshaped the structure again. What happened in February 1933 did not stop history. It redirected it. The lesson was not about strength. It was about cost. Apply pressure. Measure response. Adjust behavior. That process repeated itself across cities, across decades. No speeches marked the change. No monuments followed. Only quieter streets. More careful decisions. And power moving where resistance was lowest. This is how power worked. The story did not end with that night. It settled. That is how most power stories finish. No clear line. No final act. Just systems adjusting to pressure. The Harlem numbers operation did not become invisible. It became efficient. Dutch Schultz did not disappear. He redirected. Bumpy Johnson did not rise above risk. He learned how to manage it. Each part moved where resistance was lowest and return was highest. That is the pattern. Violence played a role, but it was not the center. The center was cost. Who could absorb it? Who could spread it? Who could avoid it? February 1933 changed the calculation. Not because 12 men went down. Because one system proved it could not be taken cheaply. After that, decisions became quieter. Pressure was applied elsewhere. Deals were structured differently. Access was negotiated, not forced. Harlem remained under stress. So did every other place where money moved illegally. No area was safe. Some were simply expensive. Bumpy Johnson understood that difference. He did not try to stop history. He positioned himself inside it. That is why the story lasted, not as a legend, as a reference point. When later operators talked about Harlem, they lowered their voices. Not out of fear, out of calculation. This is how power worked. It tested. It measured. It withdrew. And then it moved on.